Welcome in everyone, this is Sean with MTG808 Jr. and today we are going to finish our look at different ways to build the dinosaur deck here in Standard Pauper. But before we jump into the deck list, just want to make sure that everyone knows about our upcoming Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament this May. So if you are a student enrolled in K through 12 here on the island of Oahu and you enjoy playing Magic, you should be playing Standard Pauper, getting ready for this Youth Championship Scholarship Tournament. We will be giving away $500 in scholarship to first place and $250 in scholarship to second place, as well as regular pack prizes and swag prizes for the rest of our participants and finishers. So if you don't already play in our Standard Pauper tournaments, I highly recommend you check them out. They're the best way to prepare for a championship tournament like this. Our next tournament coming up is going to be February 10th at the Planet. It starts at noon, so check out our Facebook page for more information on that event if you're interested, but definitely keep your eyes peeled for our May tournament as well. We will be announcing the date for that once we have it confirmed, but it will definitely be happening in May. Alright, so jumping into our Red White Dinosaur Aggro deck in Standard Pauper. This here is the text version of the deck, which there will be a link to it in the description. You can check out if you want to. But we're going to be looking at the deck here on Magic Online. I like having the pictures to be able to look at the deck while we're talking about it. So here, this is an aggro deck. The first deck we looked at was a green-red kind of mid-range dinosaur deck. It still wanted to attack, but it was playing more like 4 and 5 drops than this deck was. And then the second deck we looked at was green-white dinosaur, and that was really more of a ramp deck. It was trying to get to 5 or 6 mana, take over with a giant guy. It was trying to win the long game. Playing an enchantment package to get some card advantage off of Benefaction of Ronus. So those are two very different decks than the deck we're looking at today. Today's deck is a very dedicated aggro deck. And so, yeah. I don't know which build of dinosaurs is best, but the good news is that if you like playing with dinosaurs, you can play them if you want to play aggro, mid-range, or control. So this here is the aggro deck. Kind of the focal point of this deck is Kinjalli's Collar. It's a 1 mana 0/3, so it doesn't attack on its own, but it does make all dinosaur spells you cast cost 1 less. Right, so if you play this guy on turn 1, as long as it's in play, the rest of your dinosaurs are going to cost 1 less. That means that on turn 2, you might be able to play a Raptor Companion and a Nest Robber, or maybe even 2 Raptor Companions, right? Playing 2 2-drops on turn 2 is very good. You might even play a 3-drop on turn 2, right? Because it'll cost 1 less. You can play it on your second turn, right? Drop your Territorial Hammerskull on turn 2 and just start attacking. So Kinjalli's Collar is, you always want it in your opening hand. You want to cast this on turn 1. This deck's best draws are going to involve this card being played on turn 1. And even though the stats on this card are not necessarily aggressive, the effect of it is good enough that we want to have 4. We want to just play this on turn 1 every game. That's the ideal opener. Okay, let's look at the rest of the creatures. We mentioned Raptor Companion. 2 mana for a 3/1 with no abilities is not that great, but since it's a dinosaur, it synergizes well with the rest of the deck. I mentioned Kinjalli's Collar, right? You can play this on turn 2 and still have a mana open to cast one of your 1-drops or to cast another dinosaur. So Raptor's Companion, not the greatest body, but we're playing it for the sake of synergy. And then Nest Robber, also a dinosaur. We're only playing 2 copies of this guy, because he gets outclassed pretty quickly. If your opponent just plays a guy with 3 toughness, then this guy becomes real awkward. But we're playing 2 of them because we want to maximize our best openers, right? The more 2-drops we have in the deck, the more likely we're going to be able to play 2 2-drop dinosaurs on turn 1 or on turn 2 after playing Kinjalli's Collar on turn 1, right? So going Kinjalli's Collar turn 1, turn 2, Raptor's Companion, and Nest Robber, boom, you have 5 power on the board on turn 2, 2 of which is already attacking, right? So those are our 2-drop dinosaurs. We also have Tiliana's Knight, which is not a dinosaur, but it gets a buff for having other dinosaurs in play. When it attacks, if you control a dinosaur, Tiliana's Knight gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So if you play it on turn 2, right, it's not an insane turn 2, right, with Kinjalli's Collar, but you'll likely have a dinosaur in play on turn 3, start attacking for 3 on turn 2. That's what an aggro deck wants to do, right? So it's just a solid 2-drop. 10 2-drops here. We want to make sure that we're getting creatures into play in the early game. Aggro decks that are not playing creatures in the first couple turns of the game are in trouble. So those are the 2-drop creatures. Moving up the curve here, we've got 4 Territorial Hammerskull. So this guy, 3 mana for a 2/3, decent stats, nothing special, but his ability is really nice. Whenever it attacks, you can tap target creature an opponent controls. So this ability will trigger as you declare attackers, which means that by the time that your opponent will get to declare blockers, whatever you target is going to be tapped, right? So you get to choose whichever one of their creatures and say, we're tapping that guy, he's not going to be able to block this turn. So Territorial Hammerskull is going to basically remove their best blocker each time it attacks, which not only lets Territorial Hammerskull get through for damage, but it allows whatever other creatures that you're attacking with to get through for damage, right? So Territorial Hammerskull, very good magic card. The other 3-drop that we're only playing 3 of this guy because we don't want to have too many expensive spells stuck in our hand. But this is Frilled Death Spitter. We talked about this. This is a new addition from Rivals of Ixalan. It was also in the red-green aggro deck, or the red-green mid-range dinosaur deck. So it's a 3 mana, 3/2, right? A little more aggressive stats than the Hammerskull, and it has Enrage. Whenever it's dealt damage, it deals 2 damage to target opponent. So the most likely line of play that's going to happen with this guy is you're going to play it, you're going to attack with it, your opponent is going to block it with a 2-power creature, they're going to trade, and your opponent's going to take 2 damage, right? So even if your opponent is blocking this guy, you're still getting in for damage. So he's really good at pushing through damage. Up here on the 4-drop slot, we have Thrash of Raptors. This card was also in the red-green mid-range deck. But 4 is kind of a lot for an aggro deck. We do have Kinjalli's Collar to help us kind of cheat this guy into play if we only have 3 lands, but most aggro decks, especially if they're only playing 20 lands, don't always get to 4, right? We don't have any other smoothing. We're not playing Commune with Dinosaurs like the other dinosaur decks were. We're not playing Druid of the Cowl to help us cheat on mana. So we don't want to play too many of this guy because we might not always be able to cast him. But when we do cast him, he's going to be awesome. He's a 4 mana 3/3. As long as you control another dinosaur, which we usually will, he's going to be a 5/3 trample, right? That's 5 power in play for 4 mana. Out of 1 card, that's about as good as you can hope for. So Thrash of Raptors tops off our curve, really helps us to punch through damage. And then moving over to some of the spells, we have pretty much the standard gamut of spells you would expect out of a red deck, right? Honed Kopesh. Pretty much every aggro deck, I think, should be running Honed Kopesh. 1 mana to play, 1 mana to equip. It allows you to be very flexible with your mana. An equipped creature gets +1/+1. So even if your opponent is just trying to kill each of your creatures with removal, having Honed Kopesh in play means that whichever creatures do survive are going to be extra large. It helps you kind of push damage through, right? If your opponent has a 4-power blocker, you can throw Honed Kopesh on one of your 3-power guys. All of a sudden, you're offering a trade when you attack instead of just attacking into a creature that's going to kill your creatures. So Honed Kopesh, very flexible. It can play offense, right? You equip it to an attacker, you attack, it might get in for damage, and then after combat, you can equip it to a creature that you want to block with, right? So we call this a mana sink because if you have extra mana lying around, odds are that you'll be able to get value out of Honed Kopesh, right? You can move it twice a turn, right? Maybe even 3 times a turn, and get good value out of it each time you move it. So Yeah, Hoenn Kopesh, best overall aggro card in this format, in my opinion. Then we have Shock, second best aggro card in the format, in my opinion. It will usually trade with a creature. It might just finish off your opponent if they're at 2. Same thing goes with Lightning Strike. 2 mana, deal 3 damage to target creature or player, right? It'll often kill a creature. It will sometimes kill a player, especially if you're pushing damage through in the early game. You get your opponent nice and low. Maybe they're at 5. They might have stabilized, killed all your creatures, or played enough blockers that you can't attack. But then if you just draw the right mix of burn spells, then you'll get to kill them. So Shock and Lightning Strike help the game plan at every point in the game. Pushing damage through early, killing your opponent late. And then rounding out our spells, we've got kind of a mix here when it comes to pump spells. I've got 2 Cartouche of Solidarity. Cartouche of Solidarity kind of helps make up for our underwhelming 2-drops, right? I was saying Nest Raptor and Raptor Companion. We're kind of playing them because they're dinosaurs, but the size of their bodies is not the greatest. But if you throw a Cartouche of Solidarity on them, give them +1/+1 on first strike, all of a sudden they're a huge threat on the battlefield. Excuse me. So Cartouche of Solidarity, I don't think we want too many of these. It can get awkward when they kind of get stuck in your hand if you don't have a creature in play or what have you. Playing them at sorcery speed, your opponent always knows, right, that your creature is going to be big when they have to make decisions about blocking and attacking and whatnot. So we're only playing 2 of these, and then that gives us room to play a couple of instant pump spells. We're playing 1 Moment of Triumph. This thing is very good at tempo. 1 mana +2/+2 allows your kind of small to medium-sized creatures trade up with bigger creatures. Also trades really nicely when your opponent tries to have a pump spell, right? If they block your territorial hammer skull with a smaller creature and then try to pump it up, you can essentially counter their pump spell by playing a pump spell of your own and negating the effect, right? So Moment of Triumph, nice one. Gaining 2 life might be relevant if your opponent is also trying to attack you. It might not be that relevant because ideally with an aggro deck, the most important life total is going to be your opponent's life total because you're trying to reduce it to 0 as fast as possible. You're not trying to pad your life total as often. It does come up though, so it will be relevant. And then the last one of that we have here in the deck is Mighty Leap. Just really there to kind of push through damage. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains flying until end of turn, right? So usually your opponents have fewer flying blockers than they have normal blockers. So if you just need to deal the last couple points of damage, giving a creature flying and punching in it's much more likely that you're going to deal those final points of damage if your creature has flying, especially if you're going to be able to tap the few flying blockers that they do have. So 1 Mighty Leap, 1 Moment of Triumph, just to have some instant speed pump spells to keep your opponent honest. So that's really the main deck. Moving over here to the sideboard. This sideboard is really basic, I would say. Lots of 4-ofs. 4 Fragmentize for the other equipment decks. 4 Compulsory Rest if your opponent is trying to play big creatures, right? If they're trying to block your small creatures with bigger creatures, you just bring in Compulsory Rest and say, nope, we're dealing with that. 4 Bishop Soldiers for if you need to race your opponent, right? Being able to trade and gain life is good if your opponent is being the aggressor, right? And that if you're playing the aggro mirror match and you are on the draw, meaning your opponent got to play first, oftentimes it's correct to try to slow down your deck, prioritize blocking over attacking, and then try to win a longer game, and Bishop Soldier is very good at doing that. Martyr of Dusk might actually play towards that same game plan, but a little bit better, so it might be worth splitting, it might be worth just playing Martyr of Dusk. I have Bishop Soldier in the board for now. I think they're close in terms of how good they are. So, if you try out the deck and you try out Martyr of Dusk and you think it's way better than Bishop Soldier, let me know. Would love to hear some feedback on that. The last card, or I guess the last three cards we have in the deck, we have a 2 of Destructive Tampering here. This has been in the sideboard of a lot of red aggro decks. It's not there for the first ability, right? You choose one, you can destroy an artifact. Paying 3 mana to destroy an artifact, not the best rate. Fragmentize, paying 1 mana to destroy an artifact, is much better. So if you want to kill artifacts, bring in Fragmentize. Don't bring in this card. But this card's second ability is really good. Creatures without flying can't block this turn. So if your opponent has a bunch of little ground dudes in play that are keeping your team from attacking, you can sideboard in this card and hopefully just play it and kill them in one hit, right? You might have 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 creatures in play, all coming in at once. Your opponent's ground guys cannot block. Hopefully casting this won the game. So we're only playing 2 because you never really want to draw multiples, since you want to cast it and end the game that turn. Squire's Devotion is the last card here on the sideboard. Lifelink is just such a powerful ability. I think it's worth having access to in the sideboard. I don't think that this deck, like the creatures in this deck, aren't really big enough and durable enough to make a game plan out of just like throwing this enchantment on a creature and then riding it to victory. But throwing this enchantment on a creature and gaining some life, before it eventually trades or dies, could swing an aggro matchup, especially when you consider the 1/1 white vampire token with lifelink that it also creates. So it's a nice little one of, kind of fills the same space as Bishop Soldier in the deck. So it might be worth playing more Squire's Devotions in these slots. As I said, you can try it out. Maybe a mix of Martyr of Dusk, Squire Devotion, and Bishop Soldier. It's up to you. But that is the red-white aggressive dinosaur deck. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like our content, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel to keep getting Standard Pauper updates, especially if you're planning on playing in our May scholarship tournament. This YouTube channel is going to be the best way for you to just be aware of what's going on in the metagame. We are going to be recording more Standard Pauper gameplay, so if you have specific deck matchups that you want to see, go ahead and request those in the comments. And if you want to support what we do, youth magic tournaments here on Oahu, or just want to support the creation of Standard Pauper content, please consider becoming a Patreon subscriber. You can choose how much you want to donate a month. For as little as $1 a month, you can join the Patreon community. You'll get access to special updates. And if you want to donate $10 or more a month, you can get your name listed on one of the sweet plaques that we have at our partner local game stores here on Oahu. So please become a patron if you want to support us. All of the scholarship money that we're going to be giving away in May is going to be coming from our Patreon budget. So keep that in mind and just have fun. I've been really enjoying playing Standard Pauper, getting to see the students play Standard Pauper, and I hope that you have been enjoying it as well. So leave a comment, hit that like button, hopefully you are subscribed, and I will catch you on the next video. Cheers.